Well, you know, if you can help people, you should. Because my mom always told me, you do good things happen to you.
The water in this neighborhood near West Green and Fry Road rose dramatically overnight, bringing an urgent need for help.
Come on. Go make it.
Whatever the craft, if it floats, it might save someone. You got a kayak.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me what you're going to do with that.
We're going to go save some people. That's what we're here for. Katie always sticks together. We always help each other.
There is a fan boat that is collecting a family that has taken water in to this house. All this water coming from the Bucker Reservoir and backing up because the inflow is happening faster than the outflow. Consequently, there's a real expectation that the water will go to 104 feet of elevation. 95 feet is the maximum capacity of the reservoir. While those numbers bring in unstoppable destruction, some here are undeterred.
It sounds like you're reluctant to leave.
Absolutely.
Tell me why.
It's just, you know, I can be miserable in my home. I can be miserable in a shelter. And if push comes to shove, we turn off electricity and go upstairs. You know, we got water to live on, food to live on, and you know, I'll lose stuff downstairs, but that's just stuff.
But others are very thankful to be out.
Thought we'd ride it out, but better sense prevailed and we decided to get.
Nearby, Jerry Drake watches all this intently. Knowing he could be next, he has moved most of his belongings upstairs.
Including, you know, documents,
It's 9 o'clock.
The furniture we really like, what we can, and this is what we've done, and that's the best we can prepare as far as I know.
So from up here, you can see all that water
Oh, yeah.
sitting out there right at the curb, creeping up onto your grass.
Yeah, about 2 more feet, it'll be in the house, I think.
Intersection up here, take a right.
And if necessary, these volunteers will be here for him as well.
This is an amazing lesson for my kids and showing them what they need to do in the community, how they need to help people and be thankful for what they have. We're very fortunate, and we need to be out here helping these other people that are less fortunate.
And I'll tell you what, one of the remarkable things that we have noticed throughout all of this is the volunteer effort that people stepping up, and to see it in action just around the corner from my house, this stream of people saying, I'm going to go help. It was just fantastic. It was really helpful.
Glad to see that that's what you found when you went out there.
First thing I saw.
Did you find that a lot of people were like that guy who said, I don't want to leave, I don't want to leave?
There were a lot of people in that particular neighborhood who thankful for them, they had the means to stay and to go above and say we're going to be okay. But there were also some others. There was an older woman. She wanted to stay, and her husband really wanted her to go. So they may have a conversation later today, for all I know. But it was really remarkable. I just walked up and I said, "Can I go on a boat with you?" This is a guy from Baton Rouge who heard from his governor, said, "You know, those folks over in Texas, they could use some help." He said, "I'm gonna grab my buddy's boat. I'm going to Texas." So he made his way to Huntsville. He spent the night in the Woodlands. He drove down to Katy Mills this morning where there were people meeting. He meets up with a guy from Sugar Land. They said, "Let's go." These two guys had never met before this morning, and they're out on a boat. They're plucking people off, and they're bringing them to dry land.
These become the stories that we tell for
Yes.
decades and decades. That's so amazing. So did anyone talk about sort of the what's next and tomorrow and what their plan is for the week, particularly people who you saw who were leaving? Did they say when they plan to come back?
It is a mystery to them because they don't know how long that water will stay there. You know, I mentioned in the story that the water may go to 104 feet. We hear from Jeff Linder that miraculously, thankfully, it may go to just a shade over 101 feet. So that's a lot of houses that will not be affected. There were people who were in the line potentially of this water who were down there trying to help, knowing full well tomorrow it could be them instead. But that last woman in my story said, I'm okay right now, so I'm going to help.
It seems like people have a very healthy perspective on the fact that homes can be fixed, property can be rebought, lives cannot. And they seem to be really focused on each other's lives right now.
Truly so, truly so. And none of these people, like so many people, thought perhaps that they might be in this boat. These people boat for, I'm sorry about the pun there, but you know, we buy our homes not really thinking about this unless we're waterside somewhere. And then suddenly, you know, after years and years, you'd look out your window, you see the headline, and sure enough, there's water out there. And so what are you going to do? They do this. They're going to be fine.
What a relief.
Yes.
What a relief for you.
It was for me. Yeah, I got to tell you. Mrs. Ziska is very thankful that our elevation is such. We learned so much about this elevation business. And now I know.
We've all gotten a little bit of an education on this.
Now I know. So we're going to be all right.
Good
to hear, Tom. Thanks so much. We're going to go right now to Houston TransStar, where Harris County Judge Ed Emmett is about to speak and give us an update. While we're waiting on him, it may be worth noting again, Caitlin, that there is a curfew in place for all people in the city of Houston. Mayor Turner spoke earlier. That curfew starts today, 12 p.m., 12 midnight, I should say, 12 midnight until 5 a.m.
And a reminder, if you are going to be volunteering or going somewhere, you need to make it there by midnight. If you are out after curfew, Police Chief Art Acevedo made it clear that that means you could be stopped and questioned. Does not mean you're necessarily in trouble, just that they're going to have, they're going to maintain the right to ask you, what are you doing out and where are you going? And if you don't have business being out, they're probably going to ask you to head home. And it's their way of having the ability to speak to people who they're concerned might be involved in illegal activity. They've seen a bit of a rise in that. They want to squash that as quickly as possible.
Right, yeah, we had seen some other communities implement these curfews over the last couple of days, but this is the first one for the city of Houston. As Caitlin said, there have been a rise in a number of cases of looting. We know 14 people were arrested, I believe. We heard from District Attorney Kim Ogg today or within the last couple of days, and also they've seen some armed robbery cases increasing. So again, this is to protect people, to protect their property. But as you said earlier, if you're out there doing some good work, rescuing people, if you're a member of the media, that does not apply to you.
And they will just check in with you. So please try to be where you need to be by midnight. And again, the penalties for looting, as you mentioned, Kim Ogg, have been increased. They're going to be increasing the penalties, for example, for burglary from 2 to 20 years up to 5 to life for a burglary. They're that serious about stopping this. As Chief Acevedo said, we are going to get you. They are not messing around, so they're out there to protect you. Let's tip in with Judge Emmett and hear what he has to say.
Really to talk about one thing, and that's a very specific announcement. There have been approximately 36 shelters set up throughout Harris County. Of course, the largest one was at George R. Brown that the city was managing, and one at M.O. Campbell, and then a lot of smaller ones around. But for the last at least 24 hours, they've been overwhelmed with people seeking refuge. So we've been talking, Mayor Turner and I, and everybody that's involved, about opening another one that's large, that can take care of a lot of our neighbors. And so this morning, I called Angela Blanchard, who is the CEO of Baker Ripley, formerly known as Neighborhood Centers, and asked, can we get a shelter open at the NRG Center in NRG Park that can handle 10,000 people? And she said yes. So today, the staff here at the county EOC and the people working at Baker Ripley, the people working at NRG, and all sorts of volunteer organizations were beginning to make plans. And this afternoon, about 4:30, I called Ms. Blanchard again and said, can you get it open by 10 o'clock tonight? She said yes. I've just come from there. It is remarkable, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The Baker Ripley team they're professional, they're used to welcoming people into our community, so they were eager to help our neighbors. I might add that the team, the Chief Strategic Officer who works for Angela Blanchard at Baker Ripley is former Mayor Anise Parker. So she is now out at NRG along with Angela and her team. then understanding that we need all the expertise we can possibly get when it comes to operating these types of shelters, I contacted former Judge Robert Eccles and former Mayor Bill White and asked them if they would help.
We've been providing cybersecurity for over 20 years.
To do so.
Our mission has always been to protect the big and the small, big companies and little girls like Amanda, energy providers, and Carter's grandmother, peaceful residents of planet Earth, and the warlords of Azeroth. We keep the secrets of global significance and those of personal importance, protecting nuclear plants and your cloud files, hundreds of millions of users, and one green bear.
I can't thank Judge Eccles and Mayor White enough for once more coming back in and pitching in to help. It's what our community is all about. So I went out there quickly. Also went home, got some changes of clothes, and I walked in, and seldom am I just completely blown away. But it is remarkable. They have a couple of hundred volunteers in place. They've got the security in place. They've got hand-painted signs welcoming their neighbors. We have teenagers. A group came forward and said, we want to set up a children's play area, so the children's play area is going to be set up. We've got a pet area for people if they want to bring their pets, and we've all learned that there are folks that won't go unless you're willing to take their pets. And the professional team that runs NRG is all out there. Even groups like the Livestock Show and Rodeo have pitched in. Their headquarters are in that same building. And so volunteers are coming in, and they are, officially it opens at 10 o'clock, but they are ready to receive our neighbors right now. It's truly amazing, truly amazing. What's the purpose of this shelter? Sometimes we forget. And in this case, is to provide a safe place for people who have not only been displaced from their homes, but they've had a miserable few days. And so it's a place of security, and it's more than that. It's really a place where these people can begin to plan to return to normalcy. So shelters are obviously never the ideal place to be, but we now have this, and so I'm announcing that it is opening at 10 o'clock, and that's really what I came down here to talk about. The other shelters need to remain open. We have plenty more. This might not be the last shelter that's open, but it's the largest one, and I don't have enough of these to pass around, but to give you an idea of what they've done out there, they've already got their little diagram of what goes where, and their dining hall is set up. But to be able to walk into a place like that and see all those cheery volunteers, a lot of young people there who have come out and are willing to help. And this is a place.
So I think Fox Life, that doesn't look good enough. Guys, if you just hold on for a few minutes, I'm going to try and find a good live stream to watch. We'll be covering 3, well, I think I'm going to put 2 up on the screen. Yeah. CBS News for one.
Jackson.
Huh?
Are you finishing up? Is it time to get back to me?
Alright. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 live streams. One on this. So if it gets annoying, I'm sorry, because I'm just astonished
knew that this was going to be a bad situation.
And Craig, you're in Miami. Give us a sense when we talk about these computer models. I mean, what are we talking about here? Are there dozens of predictions that are being made by all these computer models? And then your job is to try and sort of suss out where it looks like you might be seeing perhaps a little bit of agreement on some of these models?
So, Elaine, what we were watching as of Monday night was the models were all coming into very sharp agreement that Harvey would head towards the Middle Texas coast, and that Harvey would be a strong storm and then stall along the coast there. And so what we're looking for then is, are the models changing? Are they shifting position? It didn't happen. From Monday night through Tuesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday, everything was beat on. So that raises our confidence. And also the conditions, what we call the antecedent conditions, very warm waters in the Gulf, humidity levels that were pretty high in the atmosphere, and very low wind shear, all favorable conditions for a real strong, in this case, a major hurricane.
Jeff, you know, the question has been raised on social media and elsewhere about whether or not climate change played a role here in Harvey. What is the answer to that?
Well, this is a big question, and you know, you could spend probably hours talking about this, but no doubt, I think that at least it contributed to or enhanced Harvey. I mean, we're living in a warmer world. Since 1900, our air temperatures have gone up about 1.5 degrees. Water temperatures in the tropics have gone up about a degree, a little bit more than that. So there's more warm water to strengthen these storms. We saw rapid intensification with Harvey. We saw it last year with Matthew. Storms seem to be intensifying a little faster. But the important part in this storm was the fact that with warmer water and warmer air especially, it can hold more water vapor. So we're looking at heavier rainfall. And then kind of the last piece to the puzzle is that we think that in a warmer climate, with climate change being a factor, the steering currents, the jet streams, start to slow down a little bit, and that slows the storms, and you end up with more blocking, and we talked about blocking earlier. So, you know, whether or not this happened during this storm, during Harvey, or if it was a coincidence, it's a little bit too early to know. There'll be an attribution study on this, but I do think it's safe to say that we're living in a warmer world, and most of these systems, especially the stronger ones, are impacted by climate change. At least that's my opinion.
So, Scott, Jeff mentioned steering and jet stream. Remind us, because we hear these terms all the time, but I think, you know, for folks who are wondering, well, how does that actually impact a storm like Harvey? How does that actually work? Define for us what we're talking about here when you talk about, quote-unquote, steering currents, the jet stream, and how that actually physically is able to keep a storm like Harvey almost in place.
Yeah, and I know a lot of us, we start throwing out these meteorological, but a hurricane, a tropical system, is going to go to the path of least resistance. So kind of find its little way to wiggle its way in towards an area of low pressure, so the lowest pressure around. When you have a high pressure over here and a high pressure over here, the low pressure is going to try to go into the middle, and that's what we have. So these systems, yes, they can work their way. They have that area of low pressure. They develop themselves, kind of work their way from east to west, but they need to be steered by something in the upper atmosphere. So the jet stream, that fast of air higher up in the atmosphere, is what can also pick this up and maybe turn it a little bit more. And a lot of the times we see these tropical systems come on shore or maybe hug the coastline and then get pulled off pretty quickly in a number of days. That didn't happen here because we had one area of high pressure to the east of it, one area of high pressure, as Jeff said, off towards the west of it, and the jet stream was further off towards the north in parts of the upper Midwest. So it wasn't able to kind of grab it and pull it away. Kind of like a, if you will with me, maybe a small little hockey puck on an air hockey table, just kind of hanging out, that hasn't been hit by that, you know, as I try to hit it really, really hard, just kind of hanging out in there in the middle, and you're like, now who's going to get it? It needs some sort of motion, some sort of force to be able to pull it or move it away. So that's what we talk about as far as steering currents are concerned.
All right. And finally, Craig, let me ask you, you know, people are going to look at Harvey and wonder, is this an anomaly, or is this storm indicative of the kind of weather that will be experienced more often in the years to come?
So many volunteers themselves.
Well, you know, we know that steering patterns, currents, and also hurricane frequency goes in what we call monthly decadal cycles. In the 20s, 30s, 40s, there were many, many hurricanes, even into the 50s. And then there was a lag or a decrease in the amount of hurricane activity that lasted through the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then there's been an uptick again in the 90s through the 2000s. So we might be on the edge of an increase in activity. Might just be an anomaly, as you say. And as Jeff was mentioning, this attribution thing, the other side of that coin is if you're going to attribute maybe a stronger Harvey to climate change, then I think the other side of the coin is it's been a record length of time that the U.S. has had a major hurricane hit. The last one was in 2005. So in recorded history, there has never been that long of a period without major hurricane landfall.
Important point. All right, Jeff Biradelli, Scott Paget, and Craig Setzer, my thanks to all three of you. Really appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
The President and First Lady made their first trip to Texas Tuesday following Hurricane Harvey. President Trump heard firsthand from state and local officials responding to the still unfolding disaster. Our Jamie Yukas continues our coverage from Corpus Christi.
In Corpus Christi, President Donald Trump was optimistic about the response to Hurricane Harvey.
We're going to get you back and operating immediately. It's epic what happened, but you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything.
As he was leaving a local firehouse, he waved a Texas flag that had been from Marcos Garza and a crowd of a few hundred.
He held up my freaking flag! This is crazy. I'm about to cry.
The president was joined by relief agency officials, including from FEMA and the Red Cross, as well as Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
We won't say congratulations. We don't want to do that. We don't want to congratulate. We'll congratulate each other when it's all finished. But you have been terrific.
The president and first lady also stopped in Austin to get a look at the statewide operations.
Nobody's ever seen anything this long, and nobody's ever seen this much water.
The president pledged to work with Congress to send federal dollars.
Probably there's never been anything so expensive in our country's history.
Was anxious to get to Texas, trying to avoid the criticism that President George W. Bush faced when he initially flew over New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, rather than visiting Louisiana. Mr. Trump did stay away from the hardest hit areas, Corpus Christi resident Kenneth Ham.
I understand the logistics of it. I mean, you don't want to gunk up Rockport and Aransas Pass with a whole bunch of extra traffic. It makes a lot of sense.
I spoke earlier on Tuesday with Texas Governor Greg Abbott after his event with President Trump in Austin. Governor, we saw the president's comments when he was with you in Austin and Corpus Christi. What was his message to you during this visit?
His message was one of strong commitment to the people of Texas, tremendous compassion for the tragedy that has stricken such a large swath of our state, from the area where the hurricane came ashore all the way to the flooding of the greater Houston area. He sees the tragedy that has occurred, and he wants to work with us to help solve our problems.
Governor, I wonder, as we still begin to understand the magnitude of what's taken place in your state, what are your own expectations of the United States Congress for long-term help in recovering?
Well, you know, we've seen the help that has come after Katrina, after Sandy, after other immense tragedies like that. And so there's the hope that we will see similar relief, because we need to understand the magnitude of what has happened. Down where the hurricane hit near Corpus Christi, towns have been devastated and have mowed it down by a Category 4 hurricane. And then, of course, everybody has seen the flooding, not just in Houston, but in the greater Harris County area, of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of homes destroyed and people displaced maybe permanently. And so there are enormous challenges ahead of us, and we need to work with Congress the same effective way that we've worked with the federal government.
As you know, Governor, a number of congressmen and both your U.S. senators voted against the 2013 Sandy Relief Act. Are you expecting opposition to relief packages for your own state?
I don't, from my own state, no, I don't think so. I think our state delegation to Congress will be very strongly supportive of aid and support here. They, of course, would want to avoid any type of pork barrel spending, but they want to help address the needs of those who have been displaced and affected by this horrific tragedy.
What about opposition potentially from other state delegations?
Well, I think we've seen already, from the way that states have responded, the state of Texas has received so much support from so many of our fellow states across the United States of America. Well, this has been heartrending for not just Texans, but for all of Americans. And we stand pridefully as one united people in this. And so I feel confident that our fellow Americans are going to be helping out just as they already have.
CBS News has learned that 9,000 people have been put in the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, which, as you know, is designed to accommodate only 5,000. What's being done, Governor, to handle that number of people?
Earlier today, a couple of hours ago, we gave clearance to open up 2 new centers. One is the Toyota Center that is a block away from George R. Brown. The other is the NRG Center, which is by what most people know as the Astrodome. And so we have more space than what is needed right now. So all the space needs will be taken care of for the current evacuee population. I don't know how large it will grow, but we're prepared to provide all the accommodation that is needed, understanding this is all just temporary accommodations.
And why weren't those accommodations ready right away?
I would have to assume that there was the need was unanticipated, that the storms would not have grown as dramatic as they did grow.
Governor, some have raised the fact that as Texans will look to rebuild, they are looking back at the fact that you signed a bill this year that reduces the penalties insurance companies face for delayed payments. Now, the law affects claims made after Friday, and some homeowners are concerned that it's going to be harder for them to get insurance payments after this storm. Should the implementation be delayed?
Well, you need to understand that law has no effect whatsoever on these types of claims, and so people should not be misled by that. Every valid claim is going to be paid regardless of when it will be filed. So no one should have any concern whatsoever about that.
But I guess the question is, though, would you urge some Texans to perhaps file their insurance claims before Friday so as not to run into any kind of delays?
No one should be concerned about that. All the concerns raised about that are bogus, and no one needs to be concerned about that. All valid claims, whenever they're filed, will be paid.
Well, your Attorney General's office has received around 600 complaints in reference to price gouging. What are you doing to combat that?
It's a serious problem. I was the Attorney General before I was governor, and this is something that we see when hurricanes and storms like this arise. And there are stiff penalties that will be put on anyone who engages in any type of price gouging. Price gouging is un-American, and the penalties can be as much as $25,000 per violation. And so this can basically put a business out of business if they engage in any type of price gouging.
Finally, Governor, you wrote an editorial today, and I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about what it is that you have taken away from this experience, as horrific as it is.
For Texans, people have seen average Texans come out with their boat to rescue their fellow Texans. That's what America's all about. All of us helping each other, and it elevates our. It reminds us how great Americans are.
All right, Governor, certainly our thoughts are with you, people of your state. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You heard Governor Abbott say concerns about the insurance law taking effect on Friday are bogus. Abbott signed House Bill 1774 earlier this year, but Texas Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro says homeowners should be concerned. He tweeted Tuesday, "The new law on September 1st gives more leverage to insurance company in a disputed claim, so more delays, lowball." Castro also demanded a special session of the state legislature to delay implementation of House Bill 1774. Still to come this hour on CBSN, our coverage of the devastation in Texas continues. Crews are working around the clock to find survivors as more rain is forecast in the coming days. And President Trump says, quote, "All options are on the table after North Korea's latest missile test." You're streaming CBSN, always on. That is also why that curfew was adjusted. And it's saying that he called the mayor
absolutely out. The mayor announced the curfew for the night, saying move it so that all everyone can get down here by 7 o'clock. That curfew begins at midnight and will last until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Let's get right now to our Greg, who is live at Lights in Norman. Greg, what's it looking like out there?
Hey guys, I wanted to give you a sense of what it's like here on the east side of Central Texas. This body of, well, that is an indigenous idea. And the set up may not be able to see the reflection. That is a submerged vehicle, and it is not alone. We're talking about an entire pickup truck submerged out there. There's a mom and pop barbecue store right over there. It's completely flooded. Hey, so tell me what's back there. You said my green fire, right? Where is it? Right here. Stuff behind you, and the bridges up there. The other side, look at the apartment complex, so you hear what's where it's down there. See that tree line? That's just really in the water. I know the house right here, they gotta be some I need to see if you can come out. This bridge is gigantic. There's a whole lot more shelter space than we're gonna need. Where are you supposed to go? I really don't know. Something was coming off the field earlier. I was out there on 4 o'clock. There was both coming in the house. It's gonna be wild. Also right here, nice on the track. So I think the food is real good. It's gonna be wild in there. That whole area over there on Federal too. There were people coming in and out with we go to the corner. There's another small body of water that's gonna be submerged.
President Trump on Tuesday said North Korea's latest missile test signals contempt for its neighbors and the world. The ballistic missile flew directly over Japan before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. CBS News foreign correspondent Ben Tracy reports from Tokyo.
An early morning warning siren is how people in northern Japan learned a North Korean ballistic missile was soaring over their heads. Millions more received a text message saying missile passing, please take cover. A rattled Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the missile launch reckless and a grave threat. The Japanese military promptly deployed a surface-to-air missile launcher at a U.S. military base in Tokyo. South Korea responded by scrambling F-15 fighter jets, which conducted practice bombing runs. It also released rare footage of its own missile tests conducted last week. In an unusual move, the North Korean missile was fired from near the capital of Pyongyang, likely from a mobile launch pad. That complicates any potential preemptive strike by the U.S. because it places North Korea's missiles in unpredictable and potentially highly populated areas. Just last week, President Trump inferred that his tough talk on North Korea was changing Kim Jong-un's behavior.
I respect the fact that I believe he is starting to respect us. I respect that fact.
But since that speech, North Korea has now fired 4 missiles. North Korean state media just released a statement, and they're calling this missile that was launched over Japan, quote, muscle flexing in response to the joint military exercises currently being held by the U.S. and South Korea. Elaine?
Ben, thank you. Retired Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano served on the State Department and Homeland Security presidential transition teams. He's also Vice President of Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. He joins us from our Washington Bureau. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you.
So President Trump responded to this new test by warning North Korea that, quote, all options are on the table. What are the administration's viable military courses of action here?
Well, typically, this is something that presidents say, and it's an important part of the deterrent structure to say that all options are on the table. That doesn't mean that all options are going to be used or even intended to be used. There's some pretty big steps in the escalatory ladder here that that between what the North Koreans are doing now and the potential for conflict, and it's very, very difficult for any country involved in this to be seen really making those big steps. So it's the standard warning to North Korea. It doesn't really portend right now that there's going to be a dramatic military option on the table because the plans just aren't there for that, not for something like this.
Well, James, what does it say about Washington's diplomatic strategy that Pyongyang is still testing missiles?
It depends on what you mean by diplomatic strategy. There's a lot of diplomacy going on. There's diplomacy going on with the United States and South Korea and Japan because they have to show a common face to the North Korean threat. So there's incredible both conventional and strategic deterrence. So that's going on. There's a lot of diplomacy going on with China, either cajoling or threatening China to crank down on more entities to do something that rein in the North Korean threat. There's not a lot of diplomacy going on with North Korea right now, and the prospects for that in the near future are very low.
Well, how does the fact that you now have this missile flying over Japan directly change things in terms of foreign policy? As you well know, the Japanese officials certainly have expressed grave concern about this latest action.
Well, it is a provocative act. On the other hand, it is far less threatening than the North Koreans were stating a few weeks ago, when they said they were actually going to attack Guam and then shoot a missile towards Guam. So this is not that. It's not as provocative of the other things that the North Koreans have done in relation to a U.S. and South Korean or joint exercises, including conducting artillery barrages, sending special forces across the border, attacking ships. So, and it's also not unprecedented by depending how you want to count this, going back to the 90s. This may be the second or third time that they fired a missile over Japanese territory. So it's not unprecedented from that perspective. And there are reasons why they might want to do that, other than just to rattle the Japanese. This is an intermediate range ballistic missile. If they actually want to test the range, the only way they can really do that and not aim it at something is to fire it over Japanese territory. So that might have played into it. This is the season they do that. But this missile, it was not a direct threat to Japan. An intermediate range missile is going to go high and very fast. So just by that nature, it can't hit Japan. It's flying over Japan. And most likely the reason for the civil defense warning is once you fire a missile, it's only like 6 minutes. So there's not a whole lot of time to analyze the trajectory. And even if you don't think it's going to hit Japan, it might crack up and pieces might fall out of the sky. And so for that reason, you would do a civil defense drill. But it's very clearly that this missile could not have attacked Japan because it's a longer range missile.
Right, we'll continue to watch and see what further action might happen here out of North Korea. Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, while survivors look for shelter from the flooding in Houston, will things get too political in Washington before residents get the help they need to recover? This is CBSN.
Just superb. They've just been more than what would be expected.
Absolutely. Well, Mayor Aaron, we want to thank you for your time and thank you for your effort and housing so many people here. Once again, there are about 100 people at this particular location at the Humble Civic Center, and there are also other individuals from this community and various churches where they have found shelter here in Humble. Reporting live from Humble for your Gulf Coast Weather Authority, I'm Zayed Carey, Fox 26 News.
Now, once we're through this recovery and once we get to the other side, we have the challenge of rebuilding, which means filing insurance claims so that homeowners can stay in bills.
That's right. There's a lot of information out there about insurance claims, and some are true and some are false. We have our Emily Aiken here to clarify. There's been a lot of confusion.
Oh, a lot of confusion and a lot of bad information. I've been getting questions about the new insurance law that takes effect Friday. But before I get into what it does, let me tell you what it does not do. It does not stop you from filing a claim. It does not put a deadline on when you have to file a claim. And it does not stop your insurance company from paying that claim. Got that? Okay, good. Here's now what it does. As Houston recovers thousands of refiling insurance claims, the new law will
So does that claim number work, or do I need to email my insurance company because I keep hearing it has to be done by September 1st? And so that's where I'm confused with that. I talked to those in Austin who helped me write the information. If you file before Friday, you can have something in writing showing that you filed. This can be inconvenient if it's still on email anyway.
President Trump is back at the White House after touring relief efforts in Texas. He met with Governor Greg Abbott and both of Texas Republican Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. After meeting with emergency officials at a firehouse in Corpus Christi, the president addressed the crowd that had gathered outside.
We're going to get you back and operating immediately. Thank you, everybody. What a crowd, what a turnout. I want to thank our governor. Your governor has done a fantastic job. Governor Abbott, thank you very much. Who's right here someplace? He's right here. So we just want to thank your governor, Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, everybody, Dan. We want to thank the whole group. This has been a total cooperative effort. Again, we will see you soon. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything. Thank you all, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe in our Washington Bureau. He's a CBS News contributor and congressional reporter for The Washington Post. All right, Ed, I want to put up some analysis from your Washington Post colleague, Jenna Johnson, who writes, quote, "Yet again, Trump managed to turn attention on himself. His responses have been more focused on the power of the storm and his administration's response than on the millions of Texans whose lives have been dramatically altered by the floodwaters." So, Ed, what did the mood look like for the president's visit to Texas?
Look, he was in desperate need of a good photo op. I think that scene there outside the firehouse, outside Corpus Christi, was probably as good as it was going to get for him today. He, was apparently pushing aides to organize a trip quickly. He wanted to get down to Texas and demonstrate that he was on top of things and eager to learn more. The fact that he's coming back this weekend, apparently, the White House tonight said that he'll be there Saturday, may also visit Louisiana. So long as he's staying out of the way of the ongoing recovery efforts, I think people will understand that as president, it's important, it's symbolic for him to come and do this. But I was struck by the fact that the emphasis continued to be today on members of his administration who seem to be getting a lot of TV airtime on the ongoing coordination. His team is doing really well. Well, what about the millions of people who have been put out and who are waiting to hear about their homes and who tonight are, still struggling to figure out where they're going to sleep and how they're going to rebuild? There was very little of that, and he had no direct interaction with storm victims as far as we could tell. If and when those moments come, I think they perhaps will be more powerful and more telling about whether he's really up to the challenge of being the comforter-in-chief, which is sometimes even more important than being the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, it was interesting because we talked to our Mark Strassman, who is at the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, and I said, do the folks there even realize that the president was in Texas on this day? And he said, frankly, they're concerned with most basic human needs right now, like food and water and having facilities available to them. Ed, let me ask you, the president pledged, quote, very rapid action from Congress to fund recovery efforts, which could reach hundreds of billions of dollars. What kind of timeline can we expect on it?
I wouldn't expect them to do it next week when they get back, in part because Texas will still be tallying up the costs along with Louisiana and probably really won't be able to give a good solid number until, I would think, mid-month. Just going back to how this has been done in the past, whether it was after Superstorm Sandy or Katrina 12 years ago this week, it's going to take a little while. I've been talking to lawmakers and congressional aides about what that debate might look like. Everyone says they want it to be fast, but the Texans especially point they need to wait for cues from the governor, from the mayors, from the county judges who oversee county government, get a sense of how much they need. It was telling that today Sheila Jackson Lee, who represents Central Houston, and is usually somebody who's going to get out ahead of this kind of stuff, suggested that it could top $150 billion. The original estimate or ask for Katrina was about $200 billion, and it ended up being closer to $120 billion. So $150 billion in a far larger city across a far larger landscape that was affected does in fact sound realistic. Notable that I couldn't get any Republicans to specify a number or to agree with her. And that's because they know that in the past their party has struggled with this exact kind of debate. How do you pay out so much and not necessarily make cuts to offset those new costs? A lot of the folks who voted against those types of bills in the past, ironically, are from Texas or from the South. And a lot of Northeastern lawmakers and others across the country have been saying, aha, see, what we warned you would happen in your backyard has finally come. They'll be watching to see what happens. But nobody has suggested that they're going to hold things up just to make that point. But they're going to watch closely to see how Texas responds. One other thing I think we need to keep in mind when it comes to the political debate, Elaine, the former U.S. Coast Guard Commandant Fat Allen told us at the Post this week, if you've seen one hurricane, you've seen one hurricane. In that you cannot compare this to Hurricane Katrina, to Superstorm Sandy, to Hurricane Rita or Ike or any other storm because they're all different. They all hit different areas. What should be the focus, probably for folks that observe the political angle of this and how government operates, is how quickly is the aid getting to people? Are the lines of communications open and organized and clean between local officials, the state, and the federal government? And ultimately, does Congress get its act together and within a month or so figure out how it's going to start paying for this, providing the assistance?
It's an interesting bit of insight from someone who literally has been there. So, Ed, back on Congress. So Congress has yet to address the debt ceiling and pass a stopgap government funding measure by the end of September. Would you expect Harvey relief funding to be built into those packages separately?
I think debt ceiling has to be done separately because that's an issue regarding the government's borrowing authority in general. The spending bill and doling out money very well could be wrapped up in this somehow, but this may be done as a separate thing and almost held out separately from the budget. We'll have to wait and see. Frankly, they may decide that politically it makes more sense to tie the emergency relief to the spending fight. But remember, the president is threatening to hold up spending and potentially shut down the government if that new spending plan doesn't include new money to build new portions of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Does the president really want to be picking that fight while most of Texas and Louisiana is waiting for aid? I don't know. It'll be a different situation perhaps in a month. Does he want to shut down the government with North Korea lobbing missiles over Japan? Who knows? And if he has done other things by then, like the threatened end of the program for Dreamers, the children of immigrants, that could complicate things as well. I drew up a list this week of about 8 big items or scenarios that could really complicate things over the course of September. The National Flood Insurance Program, for example, that's going to be part of this because it needs now to be replenished as they start paying out to victims of this situation. It was probably like number 16 or 17 on that 18-item to-do list. It's now jumped essentially to number 2 and 3 or 4, up there with the debt ceiling and the spending bill because of the immediate need to address that situation.
Well, Ed, you touched on this a moment ago. In 2013, both of Texas's senators opposed funding for Sandy relief. Here's what Texas Senator Ted Cruz said about that in an interview this week. Take a listen.
And a number of others enthusiastically and supported hurricane relief for Sandy. Hurricane relief and disaster relief has been a vital federal role for a long, long time, and it should continue. The problem with that particular bill is it became a $50 billion bill that was filled with unrelated pork. 2/3 of that bill had nothing to do with Sandy, and what I said then and still believe now is that it's not right for politicians to exploit a disaster and people are hurting to pay for their own political wish list.
Long Island Congressman Peter King, Republican, tweeted, Ted Cruz and Texas cohorts voted versus NYNJ aid after Sandy, but I'll vote for Harvey aid. New York won't abandon Texas. One bad turn doesn't deserve another. So, Ed, what role do you expect the Sandy relief vote to play in this debate?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of vote for your candidate. It's just sort of remind folks that isn't it ironic that the Texas congressional delegation, most of them, not just the senators, but the members of the House, voted against that because they had concerns about where the money was going, and now they're going to have to be putting together probably a far larger package. I did talk to one Democratic congressman from Texas today, a guy named Philemon Vela, who represents the southern tip of Texas. His district was mostly spared, but some northern parts near Corpus Christi were affected. I said, what do you make of this? That your Democratic colleagues and colleagues from the Northeast are trying to make hay of the fact that your Republican colleagues voted against that bill in 2013. He said, look, I get it. I don't want to see my colleagues of either party try to score points on this. This is a far more serious situation. And I think that's ultimately what will happen. The country will come together and sort this out. Certainly along the way, some folks are going to point it out. Cruz isn't entirely correct. The Washington Post fact-checkers gave him 3 Pinocchios for that statement in that interview because most of the money did, in fact, have to do with Sandy relief. There were concerns at the time, for example, that there was like $2 million for the Smithsonian to rebuild the museum here in Washington. But guess what? That museum had been damaged by Sandy. They needed the money, but Republicans were calling that out specifically. So there was some dispute then about what exactly was Sandy relief and what wasn't. Ultimately, most of it, if not all of it, had something to do directly with that storm.
All right, Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Ed, thanks so much.
Take care.
Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis has appointed a panel to study the implementation of a White House directive on transgender people in the military. In a statement, Mattis wrote in part, panel members will bring mature experience, most notably in combat and deployed operations, and seasoned judgment to this task. The panel will assemble and thoroughly analyze all pertinent data, quantifiable and non-quantifiable. Secretary Mattis says in the meantime, the military's current policy for transgender servicemen and women will remain in effect and they will be able to continue to serve until the assessment is complete. Up next, rising waters aren't the only problem Texas residents are dealing with this week.
In the midst of the suffering here in Houston, there's another problem growing. Officials warn of price gouging for everything from water to gas. I'm Meg Oliver. That story coming up.
Satellite imagery, what I'm showing you here is the convection that was going on during all of this. Look from Liberty County to the Chambers, but especially the darkest and the thickest area of the convection was over Mooresville. So we were pushing some of that already away from us. And one of the reasons why it took a little while for Harvey to really get going is that there's a little bit of dry air that's continuing to kind of wrap around the storm system, actually kind of making it harder for it to breathe in and breathe out a little bit. Otherwise, the storm would have organized faster. We would have had winds greater than 50 miles per hour. I know it's been breezy and windy in some areas of town, but it would have been much more resistant. There's a problem with storms. The storms making landfall here. The other thing is we've had watches our storm surge along the coast today, but it's been just that.
Daddy, I need to sit down for a minute. You can help me.
I'll be there in a second.
It's moving to the east now at 6. I think that's going to change. The next update, which I expect anytime.
Oh, I'll be there in a minute.
But even then, east is okay for us because it's moving us away. By Wednesday, 1 a.m. should make landfall by then. And also by that point, almost all of us now were on the left side of the storm, the cleaner side of the storm. Wednesday at 1 p.m.
Same thing.
By Wednesday night, that's when most of us then will not see rain. And really, for our day on Wednesday, our eastern counties, Polk, San Jacinto, Liberty, Chambers County, that's what we're talking where the rain potential is. The rest of us is very minimal. I can't say there won't be any rain at all because of the humidity that's still in place, because of the daytime heating, the pop-up showers not out of the question, but nothing even remotely close to the kind of weather that we've been having. And most of us, I don't think, are going to see rain.
The effects of Harvey are straining Houston's emergency call services. 911 operators processed 75,000 calls as of Monday night. Many people who need help have complained about their calls going unanswered. Jerika Duncan has more.
When Harvey moved in and started dropping historic amounts of rain in and around Houston, many people who rode out the storm dialed 911 as floodwaters rose.
On a regular basis, we get approximately about 8,000 or 9,000 calls.
But this morning alone, you had 75,000?
That is correct. We have a great staff.
Joe Lott is administration manager at the Houston Emergency Center.
For people who are stranded, let's say on their roofs, are you getting police there immediately, or how does that work right now?
We prepare that information for dispatch purposes, and of course, we can't speak for the police and fire response because they're tied up with so many emergencies as well.
Lott says the 911 problem is complicated when people hang up and try calling back.
Should they be doing that?
No. We are advising people to go ahead and stay on the line. The worst thing they can do is hang up because what ends up happening is almost they're back at the end of the line.
More than 200 people have been working 12-hour shifts since Saturday. Normally, just 25 people are answering these phones.
Stay on the line, okay?
For Catherine Tyler, the work has become personal.
Take a deep breath, man.
What's keeping you going and motivated? You lost your car, your home.
I love this job. I've been doing this job for about 4.5 years, so they need help. My coworkers have been working long hours. I needed to get here and help them.
The 911 center also has a voice-activated system that will allow people to know when their call is being processed. Officials say they've actually seen an increasing number of people calling who are in labor, which means these call takers have had to talk people through at-home deliveries. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, Houston, Texas.
As the flooding from Harvey has worsened, we've seen countless examples of neighbors helping neighbors. But some residents have reported instances of price gouging as supplies become scarce. Meg Oliver has more.
In Texas, during a disaster like Hurricane Harvey, it's illegal to charge excessive prices for basic necessities. But complaints are pouring in to state officials, including stores charging as much as $100 for a case of drinking water.
You're not supposed to artificially inflate prices of things that are emergency or needed during a disaster.
The Attorney General's office has already fielded more than 600 complaints since the storm hit, mostly about drinking water and gasoline, which has gone as high as $10 a gallon. Also, hotels reported for tripling and quadrupling prices.
Like, where's the love, you know?
If you think you're being gouged, the Attorney General says raise the issue with the seller. If you can't resolve the matter, save your receipt and file a complaint.
We'll have to pay $15 extra.
The Better Business Bureau says gouging is often a problem around natural disasters.
Credit card purchases, some you go back to and say, look, here's the prevailing market price. Here's what I was charged. Even better yet, go back to 3 weeks ago and look what the price is now.
More than 30 states have passed anti-gouging laws. Here in Texas, violators can be fined as much as $20,000. If the victim is over 65, the fine can shoot up to $250,000. Meg Oliver, CBS News, Houston.
Houston's Lakewood megachurch opened its doors to Harvey evacuees on Tuesday. Pastor Joel Osteen had been the target of social media outrage, accusing him of closing the church off to flood victims. Osteen denied that he was attempting to keep people out of the church, which holds around 17,000 people. Lakewood Church provided photos to CBS News showing that the facility had flooded. But on Tuesday, Osteen tweeted that the church's doors were now open and it was receiving anyone in need of shelter. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Our team coverage of a city in crisis. The mayor of Houston enacts an overnight curfew as the flooding gets worse. Now more rain is in the forecast as Harvey looks to make landfall Wednesday morning as a tropical storm. President Trump and the First Lady visit Texas for the first time since Hurricane Harvey. More on his message to residents and what the government is doing to help. And a week after President Trump said Kim Jong-un was starting to respect us, North Korea fired a new warning shot. Japan's prime minister is calling it a significant threat. You're streaming CBS.
Hey, 24/7 live stream.
Jackson, you go unlock the front door for me, please.
It's kind of a reality check on
All right, I'm you.
that it makes you appreciate life and it makes you appreciate friends and community. And, Houston may be flood prone, but we have an amazing community that we're supporting each other, and we're going to get back up on our feet. We're going to recover and recover strong.
Thanks very much. We do appreciate your time. We're very sorry about what happened to you. Again, this is a story that's playing out all over, not just Maryland, but all over the city. As the water goes down, people are going to have to come back, and they're going to have to figure out what to do. There are going to be lots of hard decisions ahead of a lot of people. We wish everyone
It's supposed to be 24/7 ice snow. 10. Oh, shit. They've been live for 1 hour apparently.
Yeah, that area in particular, we've heard from so many people over there. Speaking of over there, let's go over to Energy Center. Mark Martinez is live there. The newest shelter to open for flood victims, opening in about 2 minutes. So they call for volunteers, they welcome evacuees. Have you seen anyone start to show up? How's the setup going?
Yeah, Tom and Caitlin, we have seen the volunteers show up in droves, and let's show you the setup and the volunteers behind us right now. You see all of this water that is
10 o'clock.
Hi everyone, I'm Elaine Quijano. The mayor of Houston has imposed an overnight curfew to ensure public safety as floodwaters continue to rise. That curfew will last until Wednesday at 5 a.m. Central Time. More than 3,000 people have been rescued, and several are dead, including a 34-year Houston police veteran simply trying to get to work. Many shelters are beyond capacity, so the city more mega shelters to help those in need. At the George R. Brown Convention Center in downtown Houston, more than 10,000 evacuees are sleeping on cots.
Haven't had showers in 3 days. It smells in there. It's dirty. It's a lot of stuff, and I'm really just fed up with it.
Is near Lake Houston, where those levees have been breached. Jamie Yukas is in Corpus Christi, a city that President Trump visited Tuesday.